recording. You guys are good? Probably wrong. You can throw that over there for some space.
Thank you.
Of course. And then if you need any, yeah, it's recording right now. Did you want it to record now?
No, I didn't say anything.
yeah. So it's recording right now. Just that you guys you probably have around 400 something minutes on the SD card, so you're good on that. If you need anything, I'm going to be kind of just through these doors into the yellow and white room.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, hold on.
Have fun.
And my phone is also recording audio as backup.
Perfect. I'm going to start with the first two questions.
Okay.
My first question, is there anyone who helped lay the groundwork for intercultural spaces or ethnic studies who haven't yet been documented or recognized by the school?
Okay, now, cultural spaces, and I have to speak in context of when I was here. And for you all, that's almost impossible to imagine because there's so much development that has gone on. And where the Multicultural Center is now, I mean, that did not even exist, that territory over there. But what we had during my time was a building, which Mushir and I have both mentioned in the past, used to be called a jail. Not the Jail, but the GAOL. And I know that's an old Gaelic. If I can put two and two together on it, it was a location. The history of that terminology, I'm not really good on it, but it was called the jail. And that's where, during World War II, when they had naval training pilots out here on the campus, they were using that facility. So in my sophomore year, it might have been my junior year, that the black students and the Chicano students had assistant deans for ethnic programs on the campus, and their offices were located over in the jail. So that's was a gathering place where we did a lot of cultural things over there together. Now, after my graduation of leaving, anything new that came after that, I have no idea of who was responsible for that at all. So that's another historical type of pursuit that you all might have to make. I can't give any feedback on that.
Thank you. The second question is, were there professors, staff, or brothers who actively pushed for curriculum changes or the creation of new academic programs focused more on race, identity, and social change?
Okay, when you said brothers, are you talking about Christian brothers?
Yes.
Okay, not to my recollection of any of the brothers who were pushing, but there were some who were very sensitive and supportive. There's one brother in my mind comes up was Brother Ash, and he had another brother. Can't remember their first names, but they were very supportive of the ethnic cultural identity on the campus, and they were very supportive of us as students and open to discussions. Now, the professors or the teachers that were influential for us are the teachers who were hired in the ethnic studies courses. And there's one person in mind was Professor Hekamara, and then Miss Teresa Green, and I can remember her first name, you guys, but because she was very young, we all call her by her first name. It'll pop up, but she was one of the professors in literature, black literature. So those three just stick out in my mind right off the top. And then there were two other professors who came later, a black psychology professor named Art Orton and a law professor named McClellan. I can't remember his first name. We just called him Mr. McClellan. So those were let me back up a minute. But we did have a professor who was taught African history. His name was Mr. Wogo, I can't think of his last name now either. But those were the people right in the beginning who were very supportive of us. And of course, we had open arms and embraced them into being a presence on the campus. And that's where all of that bonding and community took place in those formative years.
Do you want me to just do 3 and 4?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I will go on to the third question, which is, can you think of any classes during your time that you feel is like worth mentioning and talking about?
The classes that with these professors, okay, let me just shoot back in that African history professor. His last name was Nyaga, Nyaga, I believe that's what it was. His class was profound in African history, and the Black literature course was profound, and Karegi Hekamari, his course, which was domination and submission, those were all classes that shaped and developed my whole transition of becoming a scholar that was going into a whole nother level of awareness of being a politically minded person, as opposed when I first came up to the school, which was more of me coming right out of high school and was a famous basketball player, and I was on a basketball scholarship, that my mind was on just, okay, I'm gonna go to play professional basketball. And college was not really, education was not really forefront with me being 17 and 18 years old. But when the ethnic studies courses came and I, enrolled in those like we all participated in, it took me to a whole nother level of my self-worth as a person and as a student. And it just altered my whole way of thinking about who I was and what I was going to do post-graduation. And over time, I just completely just forgot all about pursuing an athletic career. That just went out of the window for me. And it evolved into me pursuing a credential to be a teacher. First, I wanted to be a counselor in high school or middle school. But over the time, it just zeroed into me, get in the classroom and talk to the students so you can be with them directly, one-on-one, as not opposed to having students being referred to you as a counselor. So all of those classes, they shaped my whole identity of what my purpose was at the school, to graduate, and to get back into the community to become a teacher.
Perfect. And then for question 4, it is, if a future class interviews other community partners from St. Mary's history, who do you feel should be interviewed and have their story heard and shared?
Okay, now that in itself, like when I read the questions in advance, was like, I don't know too many surviving people during that time that I personally could say this person or that person. Yet 2 names come out in the forefront is a lady named Liz Sandoval and Maria Salazar, that they were a major part of the chapel fast. And Liz Sandoval is another person who contributed a lot from the there's a term for it, it's escaping my high potential program. Okay, now in mentioning her name, right now, Mushir and myself, and this lady I'm telling you guys about, Liz Sandoval, we were all made aware of the racial incident that took place on the campus. Are you guys familiar with that? Okay, so like today, as we talk, that right there will be like a part of my discussion on what do we do moving forward with that. So with Liz Sandoval, I spoke with her this morning, and she is going to connect myself and Mushir with some of her friends that were Chicano students during our time here, and I'm going to share with her some of my friends with Mushir, who we are in contact with. But what we're going to do is get those names to Mike so that he'll say, okay, well, we can reach out to these people with numbers. But I would say there might be about 5 or 6 people that I would recommend that would be willing to participate in being interviewed. But that is something like we can put it down and get it to Mike, and then he can share that with you all in the classroom.
So our next question we have is, you have been advocating for the college to remember the significance of Mary Pleasant. Who was she? How did you come to know of her legacy, and why is her story significant to the college?
Okay.
I can, if you want me to repeat any of it.
Okay, I got it. I got it. Cool. Now, Mary Pleasant is the name that came up to me. I wasn't even aware of who she was until Mushir discovered her significance at St. Mary's College. I knew nothing about her. He didn't either. Now, Mushir is being interviewed with these same questions today, and I'm going to relegate just the bulk of the information on Mary Pleasant to Mushir's discussion and answering today, because he is more informed on it than I am, and his answers will be more direct and more fulfilled. But from my perspective on it, that Mary Pleasant is an African American woman during the time, during Civil War time. And Mushir had shared with me, and again I'll say he'll elaborate on this more, that when John Brown, with his attack on Harper's Ferry, that her name was on paper in his pocket. She was in communication with John Brown, and she was also in communication with Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. But she was here in San Francisco, and she was like a very wealthy woman, and she is one of the founding funders of getting St. Mary's money to be established. So with her contributions to the college was able to get itself to where it was able to get construction and be developed into the direction that it went into. And she was a Catholic person and was promoting that. And if you can imagine, this is Civil War time, where she was an abolitionist, and she strongly contributed to the foundation and the construction of St. Mary's College when it was in San Francisco. Now, for her, the significance for me with her, and this is all personal for me, everybody will have their own take on it, but I never knew anything about her. None of us did, black and brown students, we didn't. We came in with the mindset, this is St. Mary's. This is a Catholic school, and this is a predominantly, overwhelmingly white population. It never occurred to us that there was anybody of color that had anything to do with the ideologies and the establishment of the campus. If we would have known that, then it would have been a great incentive, more of feeling being a participant as a student with St. Mary's, because that was somebody that you could connect with. But not having that, it's like it's you're here in a void with nothing that you can go back to and say, I have somebody ethnically like me that participated in the campus of where I'm going to school. So young people, black or white, if that's known, I think the sensitivity level would increase tremendously on having some type of empathy, if that is the right word, of people who are non-white on the campus. Yes, there was someone who was black that contributed to the existence of this college. And a lot of times in my course of being a classroom instructor, I would teach a lot of history of ancient Egypt during my time being an art instructor and a math instructor. And the students of color, in particular the black students, I would always encourage them on grasping their African roots relative to Egypt. And so many of them did not make that connection of their ancestry to ancient Egypt, which was an African empire. And a lot just being based on their history was something that was dated to slavery, and not before slavery, but the African kingdoms that existed prior to that. And the photos I used to show to the students, and this is one that makes me think about Mary Pleasant, is the Sphinx. And the Sphinx originally was a bust of an African woman. You know, historical research has found that out. But over time, the features, the African features on the Sphinx had been demolished. When you see the Sphinx, as we see it now, the nose is shot off and the lips are shot off. And the reason for that, which is a lot of controversy that goes back and forth, but when Napoleon, and you guys will do your history on this if it's interesting to you or not, but when Napoleon invaded Egypt and conquered Egypt, that was a discovery for them, for Europeans at that time, that there existed an ancient civilization that was Egypt. And they flooded, the French flooded into Egypt, did much research in there, and uncovered all the artifacts and saw the magnificent and the glory of that. But this is going on at the time that there was trying to provide justification for a slave trade on Africans. Now, what would that have been like? And some scholars make reference to it, that if you see this magnificent large sculpture jutting out of the desert of an African woman, how can you justify reducing a people to saying that they were below subhuman, to say we can use you in a slave trade? Had that that the facial features of the Sphinx had continued to exist, what would that have done? And I always say that to people, wait a minute, we built this is ours. You can't say that we have no history, we have no culture, we have one of the greatest societies that ever had been created. So I link that to, like with Mary Pleasant, if people know that we have this woman who contributed to the school, it could instill a pride and contribute more to having a sense of inclusion, which makes me come back to the incident that took place on the campus. And that right there is something that I want to discuss with you all in the discussions as we're moving forward with. I know this might be one more question, you know, that you have on the docket, but this incident that just took place is like, what the heck prompted that? Who did that? And what was the mindset behind the student or students that decided this is what they were going to do. Now, my question is, with you all, as our group, this ethnic studies course, you all know about that, I'm sure. What are you all going to do, or how are you feeling about what are the next steps that you all need to take to do that, to make sure that what's coming next will be handled appropriately? Now, the lady who I mentioned earlier, Liz Sandoval, she's a very successful attorney at law, and she has constructed a letter to be submitted to the president of the school, and the people that are her contemporaries from her time here and the guys that I know are going to acknowledge her letter and let whoever it gets to the level it needs to be put into, that we have numbers of alumni that are insisting that something has to be done about this. But what's going on, so I'm turning the question back to you all. If you can enlighten me now, what's going on in your class? What's going on the campus? Is this something that is well known on the campus? And is there any talks about what happened? Are there any discussions? Just, can you enlighten me to that?
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry.
Sorry.
You go.
I think the article got published on Friday, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of late last week. So I think discussions about it on like social media forums kind of started over the weekend. And then today we discussed the event a little bit in creating community, and kind of something that has been like a widespread agreement among students is there's been very much so like a lack of transparency about the situation. And we think it was like obviously like handled very poorly by the administration, because the only like message the administration has really put out was like very clearly written by a lawyer, and was like a very short and kind of like just lack of human empathy kind of 1-minute statement just to kind of like cover their bases on that regard. I think the most information that's like known about it all comes directly from the student who like was subjected to like the racism and the abuse, and his family's story, and them reaching out to the news. So I think right now from the students there's kind of a call for there to be more discussion about it, a forefront of transparency and kind of explaining what went on. And it's like very unclear that kind of what this like the administration body is going to do about it at this point. I think CJ, another person in our class, had mentioned that he knows someone who's like a student and being kind of involved in the meetings about that. And I guess at this point it is kind of turning into a legal situation. So he said like the school is going to have like some barriers about what can be communicated with the student body just due to like investigation like guidelines. And right now it's kind of very unclear on if they know who did this or not. The school's kind of just saying, oh, it's still under investigation. A lot of the students are not sure who did it, but very confident that the school would know, just because, you know, it's a small community. It happened in Augustine, and so there's only so many people who live on that floor. And then Eloise had mentioned kind of it was a freshman student who was subjected to that, and that there's been discussions on how the freshman class is kind of showing a lot more issues with like being a bit like racist than like upperclassmen. So that's kind of something that's been a bit discussed. And there's also questions because there was like an email like a month ago at this point about like another sense of like hate crime, and that was like they put out like one statement about it that was really unclear on what happened, and there was a lot of like, you know, rumors churning out during that event. And I think now there's kind of questions on like if those two are related, if they're not. And the only thing we like really know that the school board suggested was they kind of suggested for the kid who experienced the event to just possibly transfer schools, and that they would support him if that was their decision. So far really not much action has been taken, and we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes with it. If there's anything you guys want to add, that's just like what I got from like our discussion today.
Yeah, I think that covers kind of everything we know, but I did hear from a freshman that their class specifically has really been polarized this year. I think it kind of was heightened with the presidential election. I just know their class is very polarized, and they've been dealing with a lot of blatant racism.
And I know that there's an event, I think it's on Wednesday, that like the Women and Gender Equity and like the Associated Students are doing to like bring awareness to this event, but they like want students to come to like share like their thoughts and opinions about this, and like then I think after that they'll meet with like faculty and staff to discuss like the situation that's occurring.
Okay, because I was curious about it. I had read like, now I'm going to make mention of that on what you said about asking the student or offering the student to transfer. And when I read that, it was appalling to me. It's like, this is a justification of eliminating a person off the campus or an ethnic group off the campus. If something like that, this happens, then just transfer. So with what you said about the freshman class being, you know, I'll put it with the Trump administration, it's like MAGA is giving like almost like an affirmation on behavior of what you can do, and you will be protected. So that's nothing new. You know, during my time, those same type of sentiments were there, but nothing to the degree of what somebody wrote on a wall or anything. We had some incidences that were close to getting into physical confrontations, and certain things happened that Mushir had mentioned earlier. So I'm not going to go over those and repeat it, because when you guys look at everything again, you can see those things that come up. But it's not anything that we can say is new to the mindset of the people who come to St. Mary's. And it's about what is St. Mary's going to do immediately, short term, to solve this problem, and then long range. Now, going back to Mary Pleasant, again, the acknowledgement of a black woman being a founder or co-founder, a person of color to the school, that right there could enlighten people on, you know, having a sense of coming together. Not having that and not knowing that does polarize, because you don't have anything to go back on and say, okay, well, this is a person that is from the beginning. And the students who are of color, they have a foundation here also, because ignorance is a great part of, a major part of behavior. And the people who commit those hate crimes, that's coming from their own ignorance of others. And then they're, just into their own mindset that I can do this, I can do that, and discriminate. So the education of Mary Pleasant, I'm going back to that question, is just so significant that for St. Mary's College itself, this could be a crucial point to move the Mary Pleasant issue forward right here, that this could be brought up. But again, as you all are students in your class, that from our discussions that we've talked about, of having debriefings, that you all might want to move forward on that and say, look, you know, Herman and Mushir has mentioned these things, why Mary Pleasant's presence is something that could be crucial right now. It could be very pivotal, and go after that. So I'm just like saying, for us, we did our revolutionary adventures, if you want to call them that, groundbreaking events during our time, and I'm looking at it, this is a wonderful time for you all now to take what we've been doing in our conversations to say, I can be an activist now, and take it into your own hands and become active to do that. So I'm just sending that message out to you all, that this is a very opportunistic time to make change from the ethnic studies class that we're doing. So I encourage you all to, come together and say, well, what can we do? But as you said about the aspect with the law, there's only so much that can be said for right now. But there can be something that can be said, well, what's holding up what can be said, moving that forward and taking on some type of solidarity with making everybody aware of it and bringing it to another level of consciousness. We just can't let this slide and let this go on. So I just wanted to get that out from what I had read and what I was told, and to connect with you all on how you felt about it and what was going on with it for you. So personally, amongst yourselves or friends, was this discussed, and did people bring it up in small groups that you are associated with, and what was said, just out of curiosity?
My friend group, we mainly talked about the response of the president, because we were all at dinner together when his video was released.
Yeah.
And we all just agreed it lacked empathy. It was just trying to save face. And if I was a student in David's position, I would not feel like anyone was really taking it seriously from like an emotional perspective if a student isn't feeling safe on campus. But I will say I know a lot of students who've come forward and said that they're here to support him. And I do think in a way it's good that there is this community being bonded of people who are trying to stand up against this.
Yes.
And the meetings that are happening, I think a lot of students are really passionate about getting more involved now because of that happening. And it's definitely good motivation to, be the change you want to see.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that, that, because this is like what, with me discussing with Mushir and other of our contemporaries, is that this is something that you all, the students, it's your turn now to deal with that, not really getting advice from us of our stories, because we did what we did during our time. Mm-hmm. But this is something now about ethnic studies. It's an opportunity to become an activist. And I'm glad to hear what you're saying, because the conversations have to start first. Mm-hmm. Before you do anything, you're going to talk about it and you're going to discuss it. So do you guys have any conversations that you've had also with other of your peers about it?
I think the conversations that have been like with my peers have similarly been about the frustration with how the president handled this, and how kind of like his statement just had a sense of like a lack of like empathy and humanity to it, and really just seemed like he was reading like a lawyer prepared statement off of a teleprompter. And then there's been a lot of frustration in the suggestion for David, the student who was like the victim of like the racist experience and the hate crime, to transfer schools. And there's been a lot of frustration that in that way it's kind of punishing the victim instead of punishing the perpetrator, and like suggesting for him to transfer schools rather than honestly like publishing the name of the kid who did it. We're all 18, we're all adults and older. It's not exactly a situation where it's like a minor and they have to conceal that. But I do understand there might be like a legal element in the investigation. But we're all just like very frustrated about the president handling it that way. We think that was poor and insulting and really disappointing, and that it just feels like it's putting more emphasis and issues on like David's hands rather than the students who perpetrated that against him and like did such like hateful and disgusting things. So I think there's been a wide sense of frustration about that, and just kind of a student like feeling like there needs to be kind of a transparent and honest conversation. And also like Professor Riley was kind of telling us today, it doesn't really seem exactly like this is St. Mary's first time of just kind of hiding things behind the scenes and just kind of putting out lackluster and like bare minimum information statements and not really handling things. Like Professor Riley had explained that like I think a few years ago, was he saying like 2015 or something today, where a black female professor was like walking back to her car and some students had yelled like a racial slur at her, and the administration did absolutely nothing about it, so she had to publish her own story and kind of call to the media again. So it's just kind of history at this point rhyming with itself, with the school kind of forcing the victims to take their like call for justice into their own hands and make it public to the media and kind of force the school's hand. So it's also just disappointing to hear that this is like a obviously not a first time occurrence, and just kind of the school has continued handling it in the same way with just trying to save face instead of being transparent. And in the end of the day, it makes the school and the administration look worse because of the way they've handled it so poorly on multiple occasions at this point.
And this is the president's first year here, so he has a chance to help change that, and instead it just seems like he's following that pattern of just trying to save face. And we're talking in class how it's okay that he doesn't know what to do, but then he should come out and say, this is a tricky situation, I don't know what to do, what do you guys want me to do? Give me advice, give me feedback, what can I do to make you feel safer? And instead he's just kind of not even asking the students for a response, he's just trying to shut it down. And I think if he would just ask the student body, like, what do you want me to do and how can you feel safer, and ask us for what we want to hear, they would feel heard, but they don't feel heard.
But from what you all know, is there any student organization or being organized right now to confront the president? Is there any coming together and say, we want to have discussion with you, like a town hall?
I haven't heard of any, but I feel like that's gonna happen.
Or it might be like the associated students, like that might be like the meeting that I mentioned, like with the students, they're gonna like have a discussion, and then whatever they like discuss in that meeting, they're gonna bring to the president and be like, this is the situation, or this is like the things that we discussed in that meeting, and things that we have brought up that are like not appreciative or like appropriate, and this is how we think, but that you should handle them.
Yeah, I feel like that's right around the corner, because I know right now he's getting a lot of backlash from the student body. I think that's what he needs to do, is have a meeting with students, but I don't think he's offered.
Yeah, and I think things will start to be organized now because this is the first day of like active like class and like the work week coming back after the article and everything was published and kind of disseminated amongst the student body. I think everyone kind of became aware of it over the weekend, so now it's kind of like I'm guessing the ball is starting to roll in terms of like student response and action at this point.
Okay. Right, that was my concern, was just the atmosphere of the school with something like that took place. How do you feel? As a student body, how do you feel with something like that happening, with your peers, that you're here to get an education, and this has taken place? That just puts a damper on you feeling positive about where you are. And realities like that, those are the crucial points that provoke activism, because that's what we're talking about with my stories and Mushir's story, of being activists on making change on the campus. So I'm going to say that again with you all. This is the time for activism. And you all are a part of something right now that, as you're moving forward and reflecting on our stories from what we did, perhaps it can motivate you to have discussions more, if you're not having them, of like what you said, the student association, I think you said that, doing something, and you said it was coming, you feel like this is getting ready to happen, it's going to do it, that if you all could be components of that and be involved in that and be inheritors of my stories and Mushir's, that, we would love to see that what we've contributed in our discussions could help, that your generation now could inherit that and participate in this to make this come into, as Mushir would say, I will quote him, a short-term solution and long-term solutions. So I wanted to ask you all that, so I appreciate you sharing those with me. Okay. And just to stay on task with, the questioning that we have, and I think the Mary Pleasant the reality could do a lot. That's known that everybody should, okay, this is a person who is a founder of this school. It could do quite a bit.
Alright, so our next question is, why do you think Mary Pleasant's story is not known by a current generation of St. Mary's students?
It wasn't even known by my generation. Right, just like,
Yeah.
God, what happened?
Mhm.
So once we go again to the school itself, the foundation of the school with the minds who make decisions that create the historical narrative. Okay, why is this not a part of the narrative? So none of us can go back in time and analyze, well, why was she excluded? But we can always make assumptions on, because of race, that she wouldn't be a part of what makes, if we want to call it, the magnificence of the De La Sallian principles of St. Mary. Because decisions are made by people. And the people who are in positions to create legislature and write the history, what is their mindset about exclusion? Over many of my own personal historical pursuits, I look at a lot of photographs that I have discovered, personal researching on YouTube, that a lot of black people and Native Americans who have physical presence in photographs are cropped. They're not excluded in it. So when you take in the photo, and those miners, those black cowboys, and so many of the Mexican Americans who participated in groundbreaking events, when you put it together a photo shot, you're on the outskirts of the heart of the photo, and then the photo is not giving everybody there. So Mary Pleasant could just easily be a victim, which I'm sure of, or whoever's writing the history of being non-inclusive, or else she would be there. So there was no promotion for her. Who would do the promoting? The people who are writing the history and writing the legacy of the campus. So I certainly didn't know about it. So this is big time that we need to get her story out for the school.
Okay. Our last question we have is, what are ways that SMC can honor Mary Pleasant?
Any type of, first of all, is literature of, having an historical event for her, a gathering, a dedication to her memory. If there could be a bust of her or a plaque of her, but some type of recognition of a day of honoring her with a gathering either in the quad or in some location here and dedicating recognition of her. I don't know if a statue of her or a bust plaque of her could be placed somewhere, but it should be into an inauguration event, saying this is Mary Pleasant Day, or we want to make this person known to the school campus. And then that's like short term, but to have that perpetuated and continued. So the multicultural center, if it's still called that, could that be a place, where her story is on the walls, that anybody can walk in there and see that? But those type of things, I still think it's on you all, the students. What do you do given with your generation and what would cause this to really be solidified. And I speak of that in respect for you all, the students, because of the time factors. When I was your age, 18 and 19, what was going on in the communities, we just transferred that up here to the campus because that was the Vietnam War protest, women's rights, and civil rights. All of those issues were going on. We took those issues from our communities and had them here on the campus. Right now, the student mindset of what's going on contemporary to what you all are dealing with, that's over 55 years ago. So I have respect and say, okay, well, the young students, they will develop.
All right.
Thank
My
you.
bad. Faulty stuff, but.
No worries, thank you.
Are we good? Yeah.
Yeah, it's-
Might be checking up on you in about 5 minutes, just that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the recording started again. Luckily, still we have the voice memo back up, which is perfect. Very glad we have it at this point. So I think you had kind of been like answering question 7, which is the ways you want us to like honor Mary Pleasant now. And I think you were talking about like, you know, having like a day for her and a bust kind of before the camera shut off. So if you have any like, you know, final words on that, like absolutely feel free to continue. And then I just have like 2 other questions I kind of thought of during our experience.
Okay, well, just to summarize that, what pops in my mind is like when someone goes into the Hall of Fame in baseball, you know, they have the plaque and then they're introduced, even if a person goes in after death, there's some type of gathering for the induction of that person. So if there was like a Mary Pleasant induction process into St. Mary's history with whatever physical representation that can go with it, that should just be organized and make it be an event. To where it would be, I don't know, you know, on the campus. But it would be a recognition and honoring of her that should be well planned and announced, that this information gets out, and establishing her existence as an ongoing presence on the campus.
And then for like kind of just the follow-ups I thought of, you know, like you're here, like, you know, doing these interviews, kind of touching back on like your time and how you participated in activism against like racism back in like the 60s and 70s. And I'm just kind of wondering like what comes to mind for you, like knowing that like you were kind of talking about like the history here and your personal history and just kind of seeing history rhyme with itself with the new event that happened now. And I'm just kind of curious like what thoughts and like feelings come to your mind in that regard, and kind of what hopes you have for how the administration or the student body handle it now and kind of follow in your footsteps of activism.
What comes to my mind, and I have discussed this also with knowing what just took place with some of the other guys who were basketball players with me and this other classmates on the campus, is that this is not just something designated to St. Mary's. This is across the board, okay, and I mean in the country. And it's always there. It always has been there. But, you know, we know with the MAGA movement has given, I would say, a green light for those racists to come out. I mean, if you can go and attack the Capitol, I mean, what is that saying? I mean, it's not like that's something new. That's always been there. But if you have a mouthpiece that is saying this is something you should do, take over the institutions of government and mold it into back to white supremacy and you know, white privilege, that that's a message that's saying this is what needs to take place. So this is what's going on. And if, we keep current with what's happening across the board, it's just so obvious that there's an attempt of the authoritarian movement on the country that it doesn't surprise me because it's always been there. But now it's like, okay, it's being promoted. So you're going to get more acts like this where people feel like, okay, I can do this because I have a support group now that's in power to say this is justified. And then when we go back to like the president, what he's saying about it, what he's doing about it, does he support that himself? And see, that's the question that arises. Is he a proponent and a component of this mindset that this is okay, this is acceptable? So the fight goes on, and ever since I left St. Mary's and became instructor in Oakland Unified School District, there never was a time I did not talk to my students about where they were and how valuable their education was. Because you live in a country that has, systematic racism, and you have to prepare yourself for that. And your education comes first, but also educate yourself to what's not in a textbook, but what's around you. So when you go out in the world and you deal with people who are going to feel they can write a racial slur on a wall or come to your face or call at you from a parking lot, like you said with the instructor, that don't let that come upon you not being aware of it. So prepare yourself at all times that these things are real. So with what's going on now and all my life as an educator, I've always advocated for student awareness of the history of this country. This country has a racial history that is negative towards black and brown and people of color. And that is something that cannot just be not understood because it's not written. It's never going to be written because you're not writing the history. The person who's writing the history is not going to put that in the way it should be. So it's no surprise to me. And when I was speaking to one of the other colleagues of mine, today, I just told him, I said, man, the fight still goes on. And I'm glad to be a part of this with you all, to share stories. If I could instill, in you the courage that you can muster and have to say, okay, we're in this, it's not going to go away. This is my time, I'm here. What I do now while I'm here to leave my legacy behind, like Mushir and Herman did, this is my time now to do what I'm going to do.
Perfect. And then just as kind of the last one to follow up with is, this is supposed to be kind of about other people, so, or other members from your time that you feel should be mentioned. So are there any personal people you want to shout out or kind of fold them into your story that you feel like your story of your time at St. Mary's cannot be fully understood and shared if they're not mentioned, and their role in your life isn't kind of also has a spotlight put on it,
Right. The first name that comes forefront is Odell Johnson, and Odell Johnson was the dean of students at the time when I was recruited here. And because of his illegal firing, that was brought on the boycott. But he is foremost of all. And then, of course, the professors that I mentioned earlier that taught and gave us another levels of our consciousness and awareness that we didn't know about. That's what education is all about, and they brought that. But as far as people on the campus, that there's one student who didn't stay the duration. He left after his sophomore year, and him and Mushir came from the same high school in Los Angeles, and I met him and Mushir right when we had just graduated from high school in August of 1969. But this gentleman at the time, his name was Ronnie Wilder, but now he is Muslim, and his name is Kamal Abdul-Jabbar, and we're still in touch with each other. But in developing political consciousness, he and I and Mushir, we used to call ourselves the Three Amigos. When we were walking around the campus, we were together all of the time. And his input is exactly identical to Mushir and myself, but having him as a friend on campus at that time, and somebody new that I had met, and somebody to have chances to talk with, he is definitely a person that should be mentioned. And then when I read the speech at the boycott, there was another brother named Leon Collins. Leon Collins went to Santa Clara's, the arena where the boycott game took place. And when I read the speech, Mushir and Leon, they were there with me. So if you try to imagine, Herman is out there reading a speech in a whole basketball arena on a campus being booed and jeered. I could not have done that just by myself. But I had Mushir and I had Leon flanking me on the side. They gave me great support. And of course, the guys who boycotted, they were standing on the court and did what they had to do. But Leon Collins is another person whose name that has to be brought up beyond all of the names we have mentioned before, and the players and the activists. And another gentleman was Phil Vargas. Phil Vargas is also from the same high school as Mushir. And Phil Vargas, he was one of the links to the black and brown community that he at one point in time became a roommate with Mushir and myself. He moved in with us the last year that he was here. But we were doing things, interacting with each other, and it kind of like were ambassadors to everybody else. And Phil Vargas, personally to me, was a very profound, strong brother who was politically to being Chicano and projecting what it stood to be Chicano. And he taught me a lot of Spanish and shared a lot of Mexican culture, with me. And Mushir, he was a great cook because we had a hot plate up in our room, and Phil would cook Mexican dishes for us, and we would share that with each other. But Phil Vargas is the person that very outstanding and influential to me.
Perfect. Well, I think that's kind of all the questions we have for you, and those are like the follow-ups I thought of.
Right.
So I think we're solid for today, unless there's anything else you want to share.
No, I think that this is good closure, given like with the incident going on.
Yeah.
My spirit is low,
Yeah.
on that. And but I think we covered what we needed to, given everything that's there. And I know next week's questions are all about the relationships that Mushir and myself have with each other, and some of the people that I mentioned. There'll be more coming up, during that particular point in time, and that'll just like tie into everything what you were saying about other significant peoples. So I know that's coming.
Yeah. I think
Okay.
it's good timing. We're going to put our project in the library on display for people to see, because a lot of people will walk by.
Right. I think the timing is very spiritually and divine.
Yeah.
I believe that we're doing all of this together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to?
Yeah.
And then, just on behalf, if you find any more photos that you think would be a good inclusion, this is the kid's email who's working on making the website for everything
CJ.
right now, CJ.
Okay.
Also, obviously, you could send them to Professor Viola, but if you find any more and you want to directly send them to him, because he's kind of making we're all making our own projects, but I think he's kind of making an overarching one
Yeah,
for
that's
the whole
his
class.
capstone project, is for the whole class making a website for it.
Okay.